The crystal spires of Zentara Prime reached toward the sky like frozen lightning. Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, over 800 species gathered to celebrate another century of peace and prosperity. Council Director Vesh Karn stood at the central podium, his massive Crithian frame gleaming under the lights, his 4 arms spread wide as he addressed the crowd. "We, the superior species of the galaxy, have built a civilization without equal," Vesh Karn declared. His voice boomed through translation devices that converted his words into 800 different languages. "Through our intelligence, our strength, and our advanced technology, we have created an era of unprecedented achievement." In the back rows, Ambassador Jinsu Park sat quietly and listened. He wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Around him, representatives from more impressive species occupied the better seats. The Crithians with their 4 arms and natural armor. The Vrelians with their crystalline minds that could calculate faster than computers. The Torvians with their centuries-long lifespans. Humanity had none of these gifts. They were average in every measurable way, and the Council never let them forget it. Jinsu had heard speeches like this many times before. The Council loved to celebrate itself. They never mentioned the small things that kept their civilization running. They never talked about the translators who worked through the night to prevent misunderstandings between species. They never praised the mediators who stopped arguments from becoming wars. They never noticed the logistics coordinators who made sure food reached hungry planets on time. Most of those invisible workers were human. After the ceremony ended, Jinsu walked through the marble corridors to his office. He passed by Conference Room 7, where Minji Choi was already working. The human trade negotiator had files spread across 3 tables. 2 species were arguing about a mining contract. The Drachnith representative kept slamming his claws on the table. The Torvian representative sat in offended silence, which in Torvian culture meant he was ready to declare a blood feud. Minji moved between them with patient words and careful gestures. She knew the Drachnith needed to express anger before they could negotiate. She knew the Torvians needed acknowledgement of their honor before they would compromise. After 3 hours of work, both sides signed an agreement. They left the room satisfied. Minji collapsed in her chair, exhausted. The Council would never know how close those 2 species came to war. In the medical wing, Dr. Dae-hyun Lee examined a young Vrelian patient. The child's crystalline structure was clouding at the edges, a sign of cascade syndrome. Vrelian doctors had declared the case hopeless. Their medical databases said nothing could be done. But Dae-hyun had treated this disease 200 times. He knew the databases were wrong. The key was not in following protocols exactly. The key was in watching each patient carefully and adjusting treatment based on what he saw. He spent the next 6 hours by the child's bedside, making tiny changes to the treatment every 30 minutes. He barely ate or slept. By morning, the clouding had stopped. The child would live. The Vrelian parents thanked him with tears in their crystal eyes. The Council's medical records would show the child recovered spontaneously. Dae-hyun's work would not be mentioned. This was how humanity served the Galactic Council, quietly, invisibly, without recognition or thanks. That afternoon, the Council convened for regular business. Director Vesh Karn presented a new proposal called the Efficiency Accord. The plan would streamline Council operations by removing redundant administrative positions. Thousands of jobs would be eliminated. The savings would fund more important projects. Ambassador Jinsu raised his hand to speak. Vesh Karn looked annoyed but allowed it. "I have concerns about this proposal," Jinsu said carefully. "Many of these positions serve important functions that may not be obvious from their job titles. I recommend a more detailed review before we proceed." Vesh Karn's expression hardened. "Ambassador Park, your species has always been overly cautious. This excessive concern for minor details is exactly the kind of thinking that holds the Council back from greatness. We are implementing progress, not bureaucracy. Other Council members nodded in agreement. The vote was called. 846 species voted yes. Only humanity abstained. The Efficiency Accord passed into law immediately. Over the next 3 weeks, Jin Su watched the dismissals roll out. Cultural liaison specialists, trade coordinators, medical consultants, logistics experts, translation services, conflict mediators. The Council eliminated over 50,000 positions across 2,000 worlds. More than 80% of those positions were held by humans. The final message arrived on a Tuesday morning. The Council informed Jin Su that humanity's embassy staff would be reduced from 200 people to 3. All other positions were deemed redundant and unnecessary. Jin Su sat in his office for a long time, looking at the message. He thought about the 300 years humanity had served the Council. He thought about all the crises prevented, all the lives saved, all the wars avoided. He thought about how the Council had never once acknowledged any of it. He made his decision. Jin Su composed a simple message to the Council. It contained no anger, no demands, no threats. It read, "Humanity thanks the Galactic Council for 300 years of cooperation. We hereby notify you of our withdrawal from Council space. We wish you well." He sent the message at precisely noon. Then he activated the emergency communication network that connected every human in Council space. There were 40 million humans scattered across 2,000 worlds. They all received the same instructions: begin preparations to leave. Within 48 hours, the great human exodus had begun. Humans packed their belongings quietly and efficiently. They did not argue or protest. They did not demand explanations or apologies. They simply left. Minji closed her files and walked away from negotiations she had spent months arranging. Dae-hyun finished treating his current patients, then submitted his resignation from the medical center. Across the galaxy, humans in 10,000 different roles did the same. They completed their current work, said polite goodbyes, and departed. The Council barely noticed. Director Veshikarn saw the notification of humanity's withdrawal and felt only relief. Those cautious, average humans had always been more trouble than they were worth. Now the Council could focus on important matters. The crystal spires stood as tall as ever. The Grand Assembly Hall still gleamed in the light. The Galactic Council continued its business without interruption. They had no idea what they had lost. They would learn soon enough. 3 months passed since humanity left Council space. Director Veshikarn rarely thought about their departure. The Efficiency Accord was being celebrated as a tremendous success. Bureaucracy had decreased by 23%. The Council had freed up valuable embassy space for more important species. Everything seemed to be running smoothly. Then the distress call came from Xerxes 9. Captain Thelvor of the Vrelian Star Guard received the emergency transmission and immediately diverted his ship. Xerxes 9 was a mining colony that produced rare minerals essential for faster-than-light travel. When his ship arrived, he found chaos. The main mining shaft had collapsed. 15 workers were dead. The Drachnith mining crew and the Torvian excavation team were in an armed standoff. Both sides claimed the other had violated the work schedule and caused the disaster. Both demanded immediate council justice against the other. Thelvor reviewed the work schedules and found the problem immediately. 2 different crews had been assigned to the same mining shaft at the same time. It was a simple scheduling error, but nobody had caught it. The Drachnith crew arrived first and started work. The Torvian crew arrived an hour later and demanded the Drachnith leave, claiming the shaft was theirs. The Drachnith refused. Tempers flared. Tools became weapons. The fighting caused an explosion that collapsed the shaft. Before humanity left, Sung-Min Kim had been the human supervisor at Xerxes 9. He reviewed all work schedules personally every morning. He caught errors like this before they caused problems. He understood both Drachnith and Torvian culture well enough to handle disputes before they became violent. But Sung Min was gone now, along with thousands of other human supervisors across Council space. The automated scheduling system had made the error, and nobody had caught it in time. Thelvor tried to mediate between the two crews. The Drachnith refused to speak to him because he was not Drachnith. The Torvians considered his presence an insult to their honor. Both sides demanded he arrest the other immediately. Thelvor had no choice but to request council intervention. The council appointed a committee to investigate. The committee consisted of representatives from 12 species. They argued for 6 weeks about whose cultural protocols should take precedence. Meanwhile, tensions at Xerxes 9 continued to escalate. Workers refused to enter the mines. Production stopped. The shortage of rare minerals began affecting faster-than-light travel across 3 sectors. Finally, the committee issued a ruling. They declared the Torvians had rightful claim to the mining shaft. The Drachnith were ordered to pay compensation for the deaths. The Drachnith delegates were furious. They withdrew their workers from 4 other joint projects with Torvian companies. Trade relationships that had existed for decades fell apart in days. Before humanity left, human cultural liaison specialists would have prevented this outcome. They would have found a compromise that respected both cultures. They would have acknowledged the Drachnith need for direct communication while honoring Torvian concepts of dignity. But those specialists were gone, dismissed as redundant positions. On Zentara Prime, the Council's main medical center faced a crisis of its own. A young Vrelian child was admitted with Cascade Syndrome. The disease was spreading through the Vrelian population at an alarming rate. The medical staff followed the database protocols exactly, just as they had been trained, but the child's condition continued to worsen. The senior Vrelian physician, Dr. Kethral, stayed up for 3 nights studying the medical records. She found references to successful treatments of Cascade Syndrome. All of them had been performed by Dr. Dae-Hyun Lee, the human doctor who left 3 months ago. The database contained his treatment protocols, every step written down in careful detail. But something was missing. The protocols worked on paper, but not in practice. Dr. Kethral followed every instruction precisely. She administered the correct medications at the correct times in the correct doses. The child died anyway. She did not understand what went wrong until she spoke with a Vrelian nurse who had worked alongside Dae-Hyun. The nurse explained that Dae-Hyun never followed his own protocols exactly. He watched each patient constantly, looking for tiny signs that something was wrong. He made small adjustments every few hours based on what he saw. The protocols were guidelines, not rules. The real treatment was in the observation, the intuition, the years of experience that taught him when to deviate from the plan. 3 more Vrelian children died from Cascade Syndrome over the next month. Dr. Kethral had the knowledge, but not the wisdom. The database contained information, but not understanding. The Galactic Trade Network began experiencing problems as well. Ships arrived late at their destinations. Supplies were delivered to wrong planets. Nothing catastrophic happened, but inefficiency crept into every transaction. Costs increased, delays multiplied. The Council's efficiency experts investigated and found nothing wrong with the automated systems. The routing algorithms worked perfectly. The inventory management software operated without errors. Everything functioned exactly as designed. What the experts could not see was the invisible network of human workers who had made the system actually work. The trade coordinators, who knew which ship captains could be trusted to rush emergency deliveries. The logistics experts who maintained personal relationships with warehouse managers on 100 worlds. The negotiators who smoothed over cultural misunderstandings before they disrupted commerce. The automated systems knew the rules. The humans had known the people. On a trade station in the Zerth sector, a food shipment sat in a warehouse for 3 weeks because the receiving documentation had a minor error. Before humanity left, Minji Choi would have made 2 quick calls and resolved the issue in an hour. Now the shipment sat while bureaucrats on both sides exchanged formal messages. Meanwhile, a farming colony went hungry, waiting for food that sat 50 light-years away in a warehouse. Director Veshikarn began receiving reports of these problems. None seemed serious by itself. A mining dispute here, a medical challenge there, some trade delays. Every civilization faced such issues. But the reports kept coming, more each week. Small problems that should have been resolved quickly were instead growing larger. The Vrelian delegation requested permission to contact the humans who had worked in their medical system. They needed to ask questions about treating Cascade Syndrome. Director Veshikarn read the request with growing anger. The implication that the Council needed help from humanity was insulting. The Council consisted of 847 superior species. They did not need average humans to solve their problems. He denied the request. The Vrelian children continued to die. In deep space, beyond the boundaries of Council territory, humanity was building something new. They had found unoccupied worlds far from the crystal spires and grand assemblies. Ambassador Jinsu Park stood on the balcony of a simple building and looked at the stars. Around him, 40 million humans were creating a new home. They did not speak of the Council. They did not plan revenge or demand apologies. They simply built their own civilization, quiet and peaceful. Jinsu received regular reports from the few contacts he still maintained in Council space. He read about the problems beginning to emerge. He felt no satisfaction, only sadness. He had tried to warn them. They had not listened. He deleted the reports and went back to his work. Humanity had more important things to do than watch the Council struggle. They had their own future to build. 8 months after humanity's departure, the problems could no longer be ignored. The Drachnith-Torvian dispute had spread like poison through Council space. 17 species had chosen sides, forming rival blocs based on old cultural allegiances. 3 Council members had withdrawn from joint defense agreements. Trade routes were fragmenting as species increasingly refused to work with those they distrusted. Director Veshikarn stood before an emergency council session. His 4 arms gestured emphatically as he addressed the assembled representatives. We face unexpected instability, but we are 847 superior species. We will solve this problem through our own excellence. He presented his solution, the Council Mediation Corps. It would be an elite force of trained specialists who could resolve disputes between species. The proposal allocated enormous resources. The finest experts from 40 species would design the training program. The best and brightest candidates would be selected and trained in the most advanced negotiation techniques known to galactic civilization. The Council approved the program unanimously. It seemed like the perfect answer. 3 months later, the Corps graduated its first class of 500 mediators. They had been trained in negotiation theory, conflict resolution frameworks, and diplomatic protocols. They had studied the cultural practices of every Council species. They had practiced in simulated scenarios. They were ready to save the Council from its growing crisis. They failed completely. The first test case involved a trade dispute between the Torvians and the Silicate Collective. A Torvian mining company claimed the Silicates had violated a contract by delivering inferior materials. The Silicates claimed the Torvians had changed the specifications after delivery. Both sides refused to compromise. The Council sent their best new mediator, a Carcossian named Velcor, who had graduated top of his class. He arrived with confidence and immediately began applying his training. He established neutral ground for negotiations. He created a structured framework for discussion. He used proven techniques from the textbooks. The Torvians walked out after 2 hours. They felt their honor was being processed through a bureaucratic algorithm. They felt Velcor was treating their legitimate grievances like items on a checklist. The Silicates left shortly after, claiming the mediator did not understand their crystalline psychology or their way of thinking. Both sides filed formal complaints against each other. The dispute escalated into a complete breakdown of trade relations. Velcor could not understand what went wrong. He had followed every protocol perfectly. His training had been excellent. He had done everything by the book. What he lacked was what Ambassador Jinsu Park would have brought. Jinsu would have spent the first 3 days simply listening, letting both sides express their feelings completely. He would have shared meals with them, learned about their families, understood their fears. He would have found common ground not through frameworks, but through genuine human empathy. He would have been patient enough to wait weeks if necessary for the right moment to suggest a compromise. The Council Mediation Corps failed again and again. They had knowledge without wisdom. They had training without intuition. They could apply techniques, but they could not connect with people. Meanwhile, the medical crisis deepened. Cascade syndrome had spread to 4 more species. It had always been present in their populations, but human doctors had contained it through careful treatment and early detection. Now it was spreading unchecked. The Council's medical databases had all the information humans had left behind. Every treatment protocol was documented, but the databases could not teach doctors how to truly see their patients, how to notice the tiny signs that something was wrong, how to know when to trust instinct over protocol. Mortality rates climbed steadily. Citizens across Council space demanded answers. The Council could only promise they were working on solutions. But no solutions came. The Galactic Trade Network approached complete breakdown. Without humans coordinating the invisible web of relationships and personal connections, the system operated on pure protocol. This meant it operated poorly. Food shipments arrived spoiled because nobody thought to rush them during a heat wave. Medical supplies sat in warehouses while hospitals ran short because the routing algorithm could not account for emergency situations that were not in its programming. Prices spiked across multiple sectors. Shortages spread like ripples across a pond. Then the wars began. The first was small, just a border skirmish between the Drachnith and Torvians, a disputed mining claim on a frontier world. Before humanity left, this would have been resolved through quiet negotiation. Now it exploded into violence. The Council sent mediators. The mediators made things worse by trying to impose solutions neither side would accept. The fighting spread to 3 more systems. The Second War started when the Vrelian Assembly and the Carcossian Dominion revived a 500-year-old territorial dispute. The disagreement had never been truly resolved, but Ambassador Jinsu had managed it through patient diplomacy over decades. He had built personal relationships with leaders on both sides. He had maintained communication channels. He had prevented small incidents from becoming larger conflicts. Without him, the old grievances erupted like a volcano that had been dormant for centuries. Within weeks, the Vrelian and Carcossian fleets were exchanging fire. Civilian casualties mounted. Refugee ships fled from the border zones. Director Veshikarn watched his carefully ordered civilization fall into chaos. He finally authorized what he had refused to do before. The Council sent a formal message to humanity's last known coordinates. It read, "The Galactic Council requests consultation on several matters of concern. We are willing to offer generous compensation for your expertise and time." The message traveled through space for days. Then it reached human territory. It was received and logged by automated systems. No response came back. The Council sent 3 more messages over the next month. Each was more desperate than the last. Each offered greater compensation. Each promised better treatment if humanity would return. None received a reply. Humanity had disappeared beyond the edge of Council space. They had no interest in returning to a civilization that had never valued them. They were building their own future now, far from the crystal spires and grand assemblies. On Zentara Prime, a young Vrelian analyst named Kira Ven worked late into the night. She had once worked alongside Minji Choi on trade negotiations. She had learned more from Minji than from any formal education. Now she spent months investigating what had gone wrong with the council. Her report was devastating. She traced the cascade of failures back to their source. She documented how every system in council civilization had depended on humans in ways nobody had understood. She showed how the council had measured humanity by the wrong metrics, valuing advanced technology and special abilities while missing what truly mattered. She titled her report, "Humanity Was Our Immune System." She presented her findings to the council in a special session. Director Veshkarn listened with growing horror as she explained that humanity had been everywhere in council civilization, quietly preventing problems before they became crises. They had kept systems running through relationships and intuition that could not be documented or replicated. They had been the tissue connecting everything together. When she finished, Veshkarn stood and addressed the council. His voice was firm and proud. "We are 847 superior species. We built an interstellar civilization. The humans were average in every measurable way. Their technology was not advanced. Their lifespans were short. Their physical and mental abilities fell exactly in the 50th percentile. We do not need them." But even as he spoke the words, he felt them ring hollow. The wars were spreading. The trade network was collapsing. The medical crisis was killing millions. The council was falling apart. And humanity was gone. 14 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council was dying. The crystal spires of Zentara Prime still reached toward the sky, but the civilization they represented was crumbling from within. 4 separate wars now raged across Council space. The Draknith-Torvian conflict had expanded to involve 6 allied species on each side. The Vrelian-Carcossian War had become the bloodiest conflict in 3 centuries. 2 smaller wars had erupted over trade disputes that escalated into violence. Millions had died. Entire planets had been evacuated. The trade network no longer existed as a unified system. It had fragmented into dozens of regional networks that barely cooperated with each other. Species that had traded freely for centuries now refused to do business together. Supply chains that had taken generations to build had collapsed in months. Famine threatened 17 worlds. Medical supplies ran critically short across half of Council space. The medical crisis had evolved beyond Cascade Syndrome into a cascade of epidemics. As healthcare systems fragmented and cooperation broke down, diseases that had been controlled for decades returned with terrible force. The death toll climbed into the tens of millions, and species were leaving. Every week, another council member announced their withdrawal. They cited the council's inability to maintain peace, to ensure trade, to protect their citizens. The great alliance that had united the galaxy for 1,000 years was falling apart. Director Veshkarn looked older now. His scales had lost their shine. He moved more slowly, as if carrying a great weight. He called an emergency council meeting, but only 203 species sent representatives. The vast assembly hall, built to accommodate 847 delegations, stood mostly empty. Kiravan, the young Vrelian analyst, attended the meeting. She had become something of an unofficial advisor to multiple delegations. Her report on humanity's role had been widely distributed, though the council leadership had officially dismissed it. Now, 23 species had drafted a petition. They asked Kiravan to present it to Director Veshkarn. She stood before the council and read the petition clearly. "We, the undersigned species, formally request that the Council send a delegation to human space with a full apology for how we treated them. We request that we beg them to return. We should offer them full Council membership with real representation and voting power. We should publicly recognize their contributions to our civilization. We should admit we were wrong." Director Veshkarn listened in silence. When she finished, he rose to his full height. His 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of authority. "The Council does not beg," he said firmly. "We do not need humans. They were average in every way that matters. This current instability is temporary. We will adapt and overcome. We always have. Several delegates tried to argue, but Veshkarn ended the meeting. The petition was rejected. The council tried everything else they could think of. They quadrupled funding for the Mediation Corps. They hired ancient species known for their wisdom as expert consultants. They deployed advanced artificial intelligence systems to coordinate trade. They threw resources at every problem. Nothing worked. The AI systems optimized for efficiency, but could not account for cultural sensitivity. They routed supplies by the most logical paths, but had no understanding of which species trusted each other or which relationships needed careful handling. They made mathematically perfect decisions that caused political disasters. The expert consultants were indeed wise, but they approached problems from positions of superiority. They wanted to impose solutions based on their ancient knowledge. They could not do what humans had done so naturally, which was to listen first, to find solutions together rather than dictating answers. The expanded Mediation Corps just produced more mediators who followed protocols without understanding people. They were very well trained at being ineffective. More wars erupted. The Carcosian-Vrelian conflict spread to 15 star systems. The Silicate Collective and the Methane Breathers, two species that had never been in conflict before, suddenly discovered mutual distrust and began fighting over resource rights. Ancient alliances fractured seemingly overnight. Kiravan realized something that chilled her crystal heart. These species had never truly trusted each other. They had only cooperated smoothly because humans had been there, quietly building bridges between them. Humans had been the common ground, the neutral party that everyone could work with. Without them, old suspicions and resentments rose to the surface like poison. She tried one more time. She approached Director Veshkarn privately in his office. "Director, I know you rejected the petition, but please reconsider. I have personally reviewed 500 years of diplomatic records. In every major crisis the Council faced, humans were involved in the solution. They were never the heroes. They were never in the spotlight, but they were always there, working behind the scenes. We need them." Veshkarn looked at her with tired eyes. For a moment she thought she saw doubt in his expression. Then he shook his massive head. "I have ruled the Council for 40 years. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. What made our civilization great was not average humans with their slow reflexes and short lifespans. It was the superior species, the ones with true gifts. The humans contributed labor, yes, but nothing irreplaceable. To admit otherwise would be to admit I was wrong. The Council was wrong. Our entire understanding of value and merit was wrong. I cannot do that." Kiravan left his office knowing the Council was doomed. Pride would kill them more surely than any war. Beyond Council space, humanity continued building their new civilization. They had established 7 colony worlds now. Their population was growing. They traded with independent species that had never joined the Council. They helped refugees from the Council wars, offering shelter and medical care without asking for anything in return. Ambassador Jinsu Park sat in his modest office on the human capital world. He received regular reports from contacts still in Council space. The news grew worse with each message. He read about the wars, the famines, the epidemics. He read about millions dying. A personal message arrived late one night. It was from Kiravan, sent through unauthorized channels. She had bypassed all official Council communications to reach him directly. Her message was simple and heartbreaking. "Please help us. The Council is too proud to ask, but millions of innocent people are dying. They never dismissed you. They never even knew what you did for them. They are suffering for crimes they did not commit, for the Council's arrogance, not their own. If you ever cared about any of us, please help." Jinsu read the message 3 times. He sat in silence for a long time, staring at the words on his screen. He thought about the Vrelian children who had died from Cascade Syndrome. He thought about the species going to war over disputes that could have been resolved. He thought about the ordinary people suffering while their leaders clung to pride. He thought about 300 years of being invisible, of working without recognition, of being called average and redundant. Finally, he reached out and deleted the message. His hand shook slightly as he did it. Humanity had paid their dues. They had given the Council 300 years of service. They had tried to warn them. They had been dismissed and rejected. They owed the Council nothing. But Jin Su could not sleep that night. Kiravan's words echoed in his mind. The innocent people suffering, the children dying, the famines and wars. He stood and walked to his window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, millions were dying. They had not dismissed humanity. They had never known humanity was protecting them. Was it their fault that their leaders were too proud to admit mistakes? Jin Su knew what he had to do. He just was not sure if he could convince the other humans to agree. 26 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council held its final session. The crystal spires of Zentara Prime still stood, but they were monuments to a dead civilization now. Of the original 847 member species, only 203 remained. The others had withdrawn to form regional alliances or had retreated into isolation to protect themselves. Director Veshkarn stood before the nearly empty assembly hall. He looked small somehow, despite his massive frame. The weight of failure had bent him. "We called ourselves superior," he said quietly. His voice no longer boomed with confidence. "We measured ourselves by intelligence, by technology, by physical gifts, by lifespan. We found humanity average in all these metrics. We were correct in our measurements, but we measured the wrong things." He paused, his four arms hanging limply at his sides. Humanity's gift was not that they were exceptional by our standards. Their gift was that they treated everyone else as exceptional. They saw value in every species. They built bridges instead of hierarchies. They connected instead of conquered. We thought superiority meant being better than others. They showed us that true greatness meant helping others be better. A delegate from the Silicate Collective stood. "Director, why are you telling us this now? Why not months ago when we could have acted on it?" Veshkarn's expression was bitter. "Because I was wrong. Because I let pride blind me. Because I destroyed our civilization rather than admit humans were essential. I thought acknowledging their importance would diminish us. I was a fool." He called for a vote. The motion was to formally dissolve the Galactic Council. The vote was unanimous. After 1,000 years of existence, the Council would cease to exist at midnight. Kiravan watched the vote with tears crystallizing on her face. She had tried so hard to save the Council. She had documented everything, shown them the truth, begged them to act. But pride had won. Now millions were dead, and the greatest alliance in galactic history was dust. After the final session ended, she made a decision. She would do what the Council had refused to do. She would go to humanity herself. The journey to human space took 3 weeks. When her ship arrived at the border, human patrol vessels intercepted her. They were polite, but firm. "Human territory is closed to Council species." "The Council no longer exists," Kiravan responded. "It dissolved 3 days ago. I am here as an individual, not a representative. I request an audience with Ambassador Jin Su Park." There was a long pause. Then, "Wait here." 6 hours later, she received permission to land on the human capital world. She was escorted to a simple building, nothing like the crystal spires she had known. Ambassador Jin Su Park met her in a modest office with plain furniture. He looked the same as she remembered, patient, calm, watchful. "Ambassador Park," she began, "I know I have no right to ask anything of you or humanity, but I am not here for the Council. The Council is dead. I am here for the innocent people who are dying. The Vrelian children with Cascade Syndrome who never dismissed you. The farmers facing famine who never knew you kept the trade networks running. the families caught in wars they did not start. She told him everything. The scale of the collapse, the wars spreading across 30 systems, the epidemics killing millions, the famines, the refugee crisis. She showed him images of Vrelian children dying in hospitals, their crystalline bodies clouding as doctors watched helplessly. She showed him reports of entire cities destroyed by wars over disputes that could have been resolved. When she finished, Jin-Soo sat in silence for a long time. Kiravan waited. She had said everything she could. Finally, Jin-Soo spoke. What you are asking is for humanity to return to a galaxy that never valued us, to help those who watched us be dismissed as redundant without protest, to save a civilization that thought we were average and unimportant. Yes, Kiravan said simply. I am asking for exactly that, not because anyone deserves it, but because that is who humans are. You help people who need help, even when they do not deserve it, even when they would not do the same for you. Jin-Soo looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood. I need to speak with my people. This is not a decision I can make alone. Over the next week, humanity debated. 40 million people discussed what they should do. Some argued they owed the Council nothing. The Council had rejected them, dismissed their warnings, and eliminated their jobs. They had no obligation to return. Others argued that helping was not about obligation. It was about who humanity was. If they turned their backs on suffering because of pride or resentment, they would become what the Council had been. They would put their own wounded feelings above the lives of innocent people. The vote was close. But in the end, humanity decided. Not to rejoin the Council, not to return to being invisible and undervalued, but to help anyway. Jin-Soo called Kiravan to his office. Humanity will not rejoin any council or alliance. We will not return to the old ways, but we will help, on our terms. Over the following months, human medical ships began appearing in plague zones. They did not fly council flags. They flew the simple blue banner of Earth. Human doctors treated the sick without asking about politics or alliances. They saved Vrelian children from Cascade Syndrome. They contained epidemics. They asked for nothing in return. Human mediators appeared at peace talks between warring species. They did not represent any government. They came as neutral facilitators. They listened to both sides. They found common ground. They helped species remember they could resolve differences without violence. Slowly, some of the wars ended. Human trade coordinators helped rebuild supply networks, not through the old council systems, but through new independent channels. They connected farmers with hungry populations. They ensured medical supplies reached hospitals. They rebuilt the invisible web of relationships that kept civilization functioning. Humanity did not save the council. The council was dead, killed by its own hubris. But humanity helped pick up the pieces, because that was who they were. They could not watch people suffer when they had the power to help. A new civilization began to emerge from the ashes. It was different from the council, smaller, more humble, built on cooperation rather than hierarchy, built on mutual respect rather than rankings of superiority. And at its heart, though they would never demand recognition for it, were humans quietly doing what they had always done. Jin-Soo stood in his garden one evening, looking at the stars. A message appeared on his communication device. Another species requesting human mediators to help negotiate a peace treaty. He smiled quietly and composed a response. Humanity did not need the Council's recognition to be exceptional. They had always been exceptional in the ways that truly mattered, not in their technology or their lifespans or their physical abilities, but in their compassion, in their patience, in their refusal to let others suffer when they could help. The galaxy would remember this era as the time the Galactic Council fell, but those who looked closer would see it was also the time humanity showed the rest of the galaxy what greatness truly meant. Not conquest, not dominance, not superiority, simply caring enough to help. That was enough. That had always been enough.